December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
This is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
Welcome to the H-Files. James Mundy here with my Liberty Monks co-host, Mike Mundy. How are you, brother Mike?
I feel invigorated. I have my ancestral primate blood coursing through my veins. I'm ready to roll.
That's funny. Well, John Hamer's back with us. John, you have a thing or two to say about evolution. You've written a couple of books that actually falsification of science and falsification of history have a lot of information about your take on evolution, your research, man. So we welcome you back, and thanks for jumping across the pond with us again.
You're welcome. I didn't get wet once. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I wrote about evolution in falsification of history. Then I did an updated version of it in falsification of science, which was published last year, as you guys know. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of stuff to cover. I'm not going to get close to anywhere near covering all, but we'll look at the major major elements of the deception, shall we say.
That's usually the theme, John. Usually when we cover a topic with you, you're like, well, we're not gonna be able to get into all of this because you've just got you've not only got a suitcase, you've got like 25 suitcases full of stuff to cover usually.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Well, this is an interesting topic because, in school, they took out God, of course, right? They didn't want anybody praying in school anymore. They didn't want anybody talking about God in school. They don't even want anybody thinking that creation's real. So evolution became, I think back in 1859, wasn't that when Charles Darwin, that was the origin of species, right?
Correct. Yeah. That's when he published his book, The Origin of Species. Yeah.
So all life on Earth, right, is through common descent from a last universal ancestor, right, from which all known species have diverged through the process of evolution. That was it's a quote from Darwin's book. Yeah. So I guess in simplistic terms, evolution, the theory claims that today's animals could be traced back to, common ancestors, right? So
yeah,
absolutely. And I've heard all sorts of wacky things, like even that we are descendants of fish, and miraculously a fish just jumped out of water and started scooting across land. I don't know how all that works.
I'm going to cover some of this stuff, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, according to mainstream, the mainstream evolutionists, we basically evolved from plant slime through various stages, through invertebrates and all the rest of it, then eventually through apes, and these apes suddenly became humans, which, even Darwin admitted that not one species has ever been recorded as changing into another. He actually said that in his book, My Life and Letters, Volume 1. Yeah. But there, to me, there are two theories that kind of prop up the current scientific paradigm, the so-called truth that we're told about science and our origins, and that's the Big Bang Theory and evolution. And of course, they're both intrinsically linked, because obviously without the Big Bang, they tell us, evolution couldn't have even begun, because there wouldn't have been anywhere for evolution to occur. But if the Big Bang really did happen, then in their terms, evolution's almost a given, as it follows, that the universe itself developed in this manner. Then the next logical step would be the actual evolution of living species after the evolution of planets and solar systems and suns and stars and all the rest of it. But, personally, I don't believe either theory. Big Bang was formulated by a Jesuit priest called Georges Lemaitre, and he was a Belgian guy, and he actually, what on earth a Jesuit priest is doing formulating a scientific theory that becomes universally accepted, well, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, I believe that it was an attempt to reconcile religion and science, because, at one time they were diametrically opposed. They were at loggerheads with each other. But then I guess somebody thought, wouldn't it be a great idea if we can join forces and fool everybody in that sense by coming up with a theory, and it is only a theory because the clue's in the name, the Big Bang Theory, but it's taught as fact, of course. Wouldn't it be a great idea to have a theory that reconciles both elements, religion and science, and then we can present a united front moving forward? So I think that's exactly what happened. And of course, the Western education system actually teaches children not to think, to just blindly accept anything that the establishment says is fact. Any student who uses any kind of logic and solid scientific evidence to question any of science's, proclamations, including the theory of evolution. And again, it's a theory, it's taught as fact, but it's still got that word in the title, the theory of evolution. Anybody who questions it is just usually ridiculed and insulted into submission. And that any student who submits to the will of any of the educators, in almost all of them, that is, then become unthinking robots programmed not to question any of the dogma, but they're just expected to merely accept everything that they're taught as undeniable fact, and that's how it goes. Yeah,
and that's indeed what they continue to teach, right? They continue to teach that is what happened. Big Bang happened, evolution happened. There is no creation. That's all a bunch of nonsense. And so that's where we sit today, right? And they continue to do so. So Darwin's theory, what you hit on this a little bit. What exactly does Darwin's theory claim? I know you just covered that a little bit. We all evolved from pond scum, basically.
Well, I mean, that's kind of a glib way of looking at it, but it's nevertheless the truth. Darwin's theory claims that we began as microscopic pond life, and little by little, down the millions and billions of years, we mutated, and those mutations improved us. And we became, we became from single-celled from single-celled plants. We became, single-celled animals, then multiple-celled animals, and then invertebrates, and then vertebrates, and then finally, this wonderful specimen of creation that we all are today, the human being, which is kind of top of the evolutionary tree, or so they tell us. But that was the basics of his theory. But in actual fact, it wasn't his theory. He actually built upon the theory that his grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, formulated around 50 years previously. And also, in parallel with what Darwin was doing, there was a guy called Alfred Wallace, who was another Englishman, and he more or less came up with the same idea at exactly the same time. But for some reason, Darwin became the more prominent of the two. I suspect because Darwin was heavily backed by the establishment. Darwin was a high-ranking Freemason, as were the rest of his family. And he was heavily promoted, and his theory was heavily pushed and promoted by a guy called Thomas Henry Huxley, who became known as Darwin's bulldog for his forceful assertions of the theory being correct. And of course, Thomas Henry Huxley was, again, he was part of one of the elite families, another high-ranking Freemason, and he was the grandfather of a guy called Aldous Huxley, who wrote the famous novel Brave New World, which tells of this dystopian future in much the same way as 1984 by George Orwell. And Aldous had a brother called Julian. Julian was one of the founders of the United Nations. He was the guy who was in charge of UNESCO. It's all interlocking, interconnected at the top. Same usual suspects, usual families.
Isn't it ironic that a lot of these people that establish things that are theoretical, that are passed on as truth, are always tied to like the worst organizations on the planet right now.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely,
the UN.
Yeah.
Amongst
it's
others.
always the Jesuits or
Right.
the Illuminati or the
Good God.
Freemasons or the same
Right.
the Rockefellers.
It's always
That's
tied
right.
to like
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
lines, and and people still seem like they don't have it. They don't realize they're, oh, it's a conspiracy. It's like, wait a minute. The conspiracy is this thing we've been told is truth, that there's, and this is one of the things I wanted to ask you.
Right.
What evidence does Darwin have to submit that anything that he's claiming actually holds water? Is there any evidence that he can lean on, or that anybody can still lean on today, that actually indicates, well, this could be partially or fully true?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, the one of the things that he did a voyage to South America and the Galapagos Islands about 20 odd years before he actually came up with evolution. And while he was there, he was studying the flora and fauna there. And this is all allegedly. I mean, I'm sure it's not true, but he studied a particular type of bird. I can't remember which one it was off the top of my head. And he noticed peculiarities on the Galapagos Islands, that these birds were slightly different on the Galapagos Island, and he started thinking about mutations and genes and all the rest of it. So it kind of it went from there. But I think that's just flannel. I just think that they make all this stuff up to create the impression that it's true, because they think of the theory first, and then they come up with plausible explanations why it should be believed. And I think it's kind of putting the cart before the horse, and that is exactly what they they do all the time. So I don't think evolution's any different in that respect. But I think it's worth pointing out that there are actually two elements to evolution. There is microevolution and macroevolution. Now, microevolution is the process by which mutations do occur, and if they are beneficial to that species, then they will help them survive, and that in turn makes them pass on their genes down, to their descendants, if it's something beneficial. For example, there's a species of moth that lives somewhere in the world called the peppered moth, and it lives. This is one example from thousands. Okay, I just picked this at random. It lives on a type of tree, and over a period of time, it allegedly mutated so that his wing patterns match exactly the pattern of the bark of the particular type of tree that it liked to be amongst. So that, of course, helped it camouflage itself. So therefore, the ones that were more advanced with that mutation were the ones who passed on their genes, because they were the ones less likely to be eaten by predators. It's simple maths, I guess. And so eventually, all their descendants have this attribute, and that's microevolution. It's like a kind of a adaptation of a mutation. But that's opposed to macroevolution, which is what Darwin propounded. And macroevolution is the wholesale changing of one species into another, which, as any real anthropologist, biologist will tell you, is absolutely impossible. For one species to change into another is just totally impossible. So, the summation of that is that the theory of evolution, it is exactly that, a theory, and it's a very tenuous one as well. Darwin, as I said, was part of the establishment. He is even rumoured, and I'm not seeing any concrete evidence, but I have seen allegations of this, that he confessed in his last days, on his deathbed or whatever, to the hoax that he was instrumental in inflicting on us all. And,
really?
Some of his quoted statements actually do bear out that premise. But, I mean, of course, daring to question the great religion of evolution, I mean, it has become a religion. I mean, it's got no scientific basis whatsoever, despite what they tell us. So, anybody who doesn't believe in it, evolution, the scientific evolution, they're regarded as religious zealots or imbeciles. I mean, and this is all obviously the purpose of the propaganda behind it. And they tell us, of course, that the fossil records absolutely support the theory of evolution, whereas the actual opposite of that is true. it's widely acknowledged, even amongst evolutionists, that fossil records do not support the theory of evolution. You know, if species changed one into another over time, then surely there would be fossils with all these transitional species in them, but there are none. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous in my view.
The half monkey, half man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There are none, and this is what they call the missing link.
Right.
Okay, they refer to the missing link between apes and men, but they never ever hear them discussing missing links between all the other transitional, transitions from one species to another. But none of those exist either. And Darwin actually stated that the reason that no transitional forms had yet been found was because not enough time had elapsed at that point in time to discover the fossils. But obviously, since Darwin died, we've had 150 years plus, and there's still been no transitional fossils found. I mean, when you think about it, logically. I mean, I'll tell you what actually put me on the track of it. And it was years and years ago when even before I became a truth seeker, I had a pamphlet pushed through the door and from the Jehovah's Witnesses. And it was about, how evolution is nonsense. And it talked about what I'm going to talk about in a moment. And I just threw it aside and I thought, that's nonsense. And then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. But I didn't actually do anything about it at that point in time. But it did set the question going in my mind. And what this pamphlet said was, if evolution were true, what actually kicks off the change from one species to another, and how could that possibly be beneficial to any creature? And how could any creature that had begun that multi-million generational process, which is what it takes, how could it know? How could it expedite a plan or begin to expedite a plan that it wasn't going to see come to fruition for millions upon millions of years? And also, it would require partially formed organs. What use is a partially formed organ, such as a kidney or a wing or an eye? It's self-contradictory. I mean, evolution is meant to consist of beneficial changes, not changes that would actually hinder an animal. And if these partial new creatures mated with another one of their own species that is non-partially evolved, how would that work? None of it makes any sense. The whole thing is just absolutely crazy, in my view.
Did Darwin ever explain, like, let's say 10 million years ago, there's a bunch of apes that became human, but who decided which apes became human? How come all the apes didn't become human? How come some of them still are apes? Right?
Exactly. Yeah, no, he didn't. To answer your question, and yes, that's a very pertinent question and an unanswerable one. Yeah, actually, I've got the quote here from Darwin. I'm just looking on the screen here. It says, this is from Charles Darwin, My Life and Letters, Volume 1. And it says, not one change of species into another is on record. We cannot prove that a single species has changed into another.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Which is the whole premise of evolution, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. Yeah. I mean, it's just, the more you look into it, in a scientific way rather than just a cursory way.
Yeah.
The more you realize that the whole thing is just so full of holes. It's just madness. The whole thing. None of it makes any sense. There's a guy called Richard Milton. I think he was an American guy. I'm not sure, but he was an ardent evolutionist for a long time in his life, until he really began to properly investigate, the myths and legends of evolution in any depth. And after 20 years of studying and writing about evolution, he realized that there were so many, holes in the theory. So he decided to actually put every main classic proof of Darwinism to the test. And the results left him stunned. He found that the theory couldn't even stand up to even rudimentary investigative journalism, not let alone serious scientific research. And eventually he published a book. It went full circle. He changed his mind, and he published a book entitled The Facts of Life, Shattering the Myths of Darwinism. But what happened next totally shocked him, and he wasn't prepared for it.
Was he shunned by the
yeah,
scientists?
I mean, again, I've got a quote here from him. He said, "I experienced the witch hunting activity of the Darwinist police at first hand. It was deeply disappointing to find myself being described by the prominent Oxford zoologist Richard Dawkins as loony, stupid, and in need of psychiatric help, purely in response to scientific reporting." This is what they do. They use straw man arguments all the time, especially people like Dawkins. I mean, it was an absolute pain in the ass, the guy. I mean, it's just, I don't know if, are you aware of Richard Dawkins at all?
No.
He's an English zoologist, and he makes it his business to go around debunking anyone who believes in creationism, basically. And all he does, he never has a serious debate with anybody. All he does is insult them. Okay, and this is Professor Richard Dawkins. Yeah,
wow. Well, I see that I see the playbook hasn't changed much over the years. No, it's still the same thing now. You know?
Oh yeah, well, why change a winning formula? You know, I mean, they know that it works. So you know, all they do is just insult people. It's the same with there's the American guy called Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's who you probably know the guy. Is allegedly a scientist, but I just think he's an actor.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly a scientist.
Yeah, like Bill Nye the Science Guy.
That's right, yeah. They're just actors, I think. He might have a degree in science at some crappy university somewhere, but they're certainly not what I would call real scientists, that's for sure. But he's the same with anybody who doesn't believe in the globe Earth. Yeah. You know, but he won't debate them. He won't debate them. He just insults them, and this is how they do it. You know?
Well, people have tried to debate him on that topic.
Absolutely, I know.
Rogan had who did Rogan have on, Mike? He didn't have
Rogan tried to get Eric Dubay on with him, and
that's right.
And then he bailed, huh? Right?
Yeah,
yeah. He said yes at first, I think, didn't he? Yeah. And then, as I understand it, I've seen a video of him, and he didn't actually say I won't do it. He said I can't do it, which led me to believe that he was being instructed that he couldn't.
Yeah.
He was taking his orders from up here.
Yep.
He said I can't do it. I can't do it.
Can't and won't are two different things.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I mean, the other thing about Darwin is, and his followers, his camp followers, in today's ultra PC world, they would have been condemned as vile racists and eugenicists because they actually believed that black and brown people were much closer to their alleged ancestral ape man than white people.
Wow.
Yeah, and they actually considered the fact that black people were this illusory missing link at one point. You know, so that's the kind of people we were dealing with.
And we really want to talk about who the real racists are. My God.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Yeah. So there's lots of bits of stuff here that I'm going to try and cover. I'm just looking at my notes here. Yeah. You know, for example, evolutionists state confidently that birds, or almost birds, whatever you want to call them, as they were developing into birds, developed hollow bones over a time span of several million years to reduce their weight in order to better facilitate flight. I mean, as I said before, how could a bird possibly pass along this obviously multi-generational plan in order to keep this lighter bone idea progressing? The evolutionary concept of growing a wing and adapting bones to become hollow to enable a function which would only become active several million generations later absolutely violates the very foundation of evolutionary theory. Yeah, you know, it doesn't support it at all. And when you think about that concept of a process starting that has to take 1 million generations or more to take effect, the whole thing just falls apart. You know, how at that point in time when the process began, could that animal possibly know, you know, that it was developing something that would be beneficial to its descendants several million years later? just doesn't make any kind of logical sense at all, does it?
And why would it have wings in the first place if you can't use them?
Exactly. Yeah. You know, because wing, how does a wing evolve? You know, do we get a little stub? And why would it produce a little stub? What use would that be? Just nonsense. And then there's stuff like, you know, there's a species of orchid that has a 4-inch flower tube, which has a symbiotic relationship with an insect with a 4-inch nose that pollinates it. And obviously the mutations needed for that to happen can't take a long time to synchronize. They must happen immediately, or one of both species will fail. You know, if the flower mutates to a 5-inch tube first, the fly can't reach the nectar and it would stop visiting it. And therefore the flower would die out. And if the flower mutates to a 5-inch, if the insect mutates to a 5-inch nose, then the pollen's not deposited on him and the flower again fails, and neither species can afford to wait around for accidental mutations of just the right sort. They've got to evolve together. And that is so unlikely as to actually be virtually or next to impossible. And it just completely debunks the evolutionary theory. And that's just one of many examples. There are so many symbiotic relationships in nature that could not possibly evolve together. It's just, the whole thing is just crazy.
But it makes sense that there was a creator that knew this and created that way. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm absolutely a creationist, and I have been for a very long time now. You know, I don't pretend to know what that creator consists of. I know some people have, you know, very strong religious beliefs. Maybe you guys do as well too. I mean, I would regard myself as being spiritual rather than religious. But you know, that each to their own. I have no quarrels with anyone on that score. But yeah, I mean, I don't see an alternative. It's just not possible. And I'm at the end of this talk, I'm gonna give a quote, read out a quotation from a Harvard microbiologist, which is very, very telling. But I'll save that till the end. I'll keep you in suspense till the
grand finale.
Yeah, the grand finale. Yeah, absolutely.
It's not Elizabeth Warren, is it?
No.
Okay.
No. Okay. Yeah, I mean, you get situations where, you know, sharks and other fish are often stranded on beaches where, you know, they die probably a very unpleasant death by suffocating in air.
Yeah.
You know, do evolutionists think it's perhaps possible that these sharks are attempting to expedite a multi-million generation plan to grow legs and breathe air? You know, the entire concept's laughable, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know. And let's talk a little bit about dinosaurs. Well, I don't believe that dinosaurs ever existed at all in any way, shape, or form. I always get lambasted for this one, but you know, this is just as a result of my research. This is what I found. I think they were formulated as just another prop for evolution, because they kind of try and pin the label of missing link on them as well. They say that they were the missing link between sea and land creatures, because all life originated in the sea, of course, they tell us. And then from land to air as well, because, you know, you get the flying dinosaurs as well. So I think it's just another prop for evolution, you know, to prop up the insubstantial theory. I mean, they tell us that we're all wiped out by a meteorite, which fell to Earth about 65 million years ago in the area of the Yucatan Peninsula in the Gulf of Mexico, and none survived, not a single one.
In the entire world, right?
Yeah, which I am. It always struck me as being a bit odd, to say the least. But the most striking thing about dinosaurs is that dinosaur fossils, there were none found at all anywhere ever in the world until the early days of evolution in the mid-19th century. You know,
so nowhere before that, you're saying?
No.
So
there's
okay.
With all the civilizations and all the advancements and all the construction, they never ever found one until all of a sudden, poof, like magic, here's all these dinosaur bones.
Yeah,
no kidding. I did not know that. So you're saying,
absolutely.
So you're saying that. So what that would have been. So when did they officially discover? Well, you're saying they never did discover really any, but like allegedly, then when did they discover the first dinosaur bone?
in the 1850s.
1850s. Okay.
Yeah.
Wasn't it in
and-
So
Missouri or something?
right around the time that evolution theory started to become a reality.
That's right. And
Okay.
the dinosaur, the genus Dinosaurs, which just means giant lizards, was formulated by a guy called, I've forgotten his name now, but he was a senior member of the Royal Society. And for those who are not aware, the Royal Society is the seat of all knowledge in the scientific world. If the Royal Society doesn't approve anything, then it's not fact. You know, as far as they're concerned. And it's very, very Freemasonic. It's Freemasonic from floor to ceiling. Senior Freemasons run the Royal Society. And again, I'm gonna come on and talk a little bit about the connection between Freemasonry and evolution in a short while.
Okay.
But as I say, there were no dinosaur fossils found at all. Even there are no records in any ancient tribal written records or oral records that any dinosaur bones were ever found. There's no artifacts of dinosaur bones in any ancient tribal settings at all. There is nothing. So yeah, it was in the 1840s when the dinosaur genus was first pronounced to be real. And
and it's not like they can say, well, we didn't have the right excavation tools that we have today, or whatever, because in the 1840s, didn't they just basically, I mean, they didn't have hand tools back then? I mean, they didn't really have any machinery at that point.
No. Well, I mean, they didn't have machinery, but I mean, there were certainly archaeological excavations going on.
Yeah, okay.
You know, that has been for centuries, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe not using the same tools we have today, but there was still excavations going on.
Right.
And you know, another element is that all dinosaur skeletons in museums, every single one, you know, you see these grand, you know, massive 100-foot long dinosaur bones and, you know, skeletons. They're all fakes. They're all actually admitted to be fakes. They tell us that all the real bones are far too valuable to be put on display, and they're kept under lock and key in the basement of the Smithsonian and the Natural History Museum in London and places like that, with only certain highly privileged paleontologists allowed to view them, which is all very convenient, isn't it? Something took place in the 19th century, you know, just after the theory of evolution had been promoted in the 1860s and 1870s, called the Dinosaur Wars, and it was two scientists who actually worked together at one point, but eventually became bitter rivals. And they kind of embarked on this war of one-upmanship as to who could discover the most new species. And there were hundreds and hundreds of new species named as a result of these guys, you know, coming out with all these alleged finds of these bones. And every single one, virtually, bar one or two, have all now been proven as fakes. So, you know, they were just, it was just fakery, the absolute fakery. You know, you know, I mean, just take the actual episode of the dinosaurs dying out in 65 million years ago. I mean, it's quite puzzling anyway. I mean, surely at least a few would have survived. I mean, the individuals of most other species survive, and even some lizard species survive. So why wouldn't dinosaurs? You know, it just very, very conveniently, every last dinosaur on Earth was wiped out in that cataclysm, if it even happened. I mean, again, it's only a theory. You know, the dinosaurs wiped out by meteorite is only a theory, but again, it's evolved, if you excuse the pun, into concrete fact, as a lot of things do. You know, yeah.
So wasn't there who discovered the first? Did you say who that was? Who discovered the first dinosaur skeleton?
I don't know who discovered the first dinosaur skeleton, but the guy who, I'm just trying to think of the name of the guy who actually declared that dinosaurs were a thing, and that was in the 1840s, so it was slightly before evolution, but I think they saw it as an opportunity to promote that as a good way of propping up the evolutionary theory. I can't remember his name, but it was a senior guy in the Royal Society.
Well, gosh,
Richard Owen, he was called.
Oh,
it's just come into my head. Sir Richard Owen of the Royal Society. I mean, you know, that when you use those words, the Royal Society, that raises an immediate red flag to me. You know, it's utterly steeped in Freemasonry.
Well, right away, a red flag to your point is saying that, oh, only the privileged, excuse me, paleontologists can see the bones. I mean, if no one's truly in the general public ever seen an actual dinosaur bone, you know how much money they could make on actually, oh, here are the real ones.
Yeah,
you know,
well,
here are the real ones.
This is exactly what they do. You know, that alleged real T-Rex bones, you know, sold for $12 million and ridiculous sums like that. I mean, it's just another money-making racket, you know. So yeah, shortly after, dinosaurs were declared to be a real, you know, thing, albeit extinct. To no doubt to Freemasonry's delight and amazement, the first dinosaur fossil was actually found in the upper Missouri River in the US Midwest. You know, great, proof at last. Woo! Cried all the various vested interests in unison. You know, it's amazing, isn't it, that no one had ever discovered a dinosaur fossil until, yeah, very shortly after the creatures were first described. That's just, you know, just a great.
How do you wait a minute? How do you describe a creature before you find any evidence that they were here?
Great question. Great question. I mean, the whole thing is just nonsense, isn't it?
Wasn't it just like a piece of a bone or something? And from that little piece, they decided, oh, this is a giant creature.
Well, exactly. Yeah. You know, what they actually found was a tooth, right? That they decided was a dinosaur tooth. Obviously a fossil of one, not a real tooth, because it would have rotted away. This tooth was sent to this leading paleontologist, who identified it as belonging to a creature which we've now named a trachodon, which in itself is quite remarkable because no one at that stage had ever classified any dinosaur species at all. Indeed, they went on to classify, but nevertheless, it was just accepted as proof of these utterly unbelievable creatures' past existence. And not only that, taking that tooth, they extrapolated an entire skeleton from this one tooth.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing.
It's incredible. Yeah, I mean, it's totally unnecessary. I'm sure, for me to state that it's impossible to construct an entire hypothetical living organism based on a single tooth, but that's exactly what they did.
I didn't learn this in middle school and junior high and high school, John. They didn't tell.
Now they did, but I'm sure
they didn't tell us that the thing that gets me is what you just said a minute ago. They didn't tell us that the discovery or the naming of the dinosaurs, whatever, what happened before they actually found one. I can't get my head around that one.
Absolutely true. And you know, but apparently these fossils had existed for hundreds of millions of years, but had never ever been found by any other human civilization until the theory of evolution emerged in the mid-19th century.
So what about all the archaeologists and people now that do excavations that say that they found, hey, we found one? I mean, are you saying that those folks are they finding something that it's not what that really think it is, or is this all part of a elaborate?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a lot of fakery going on, don't get me wrong, but I also think that people are being fooled into, by the whole dinosaur propaganda stuff, that they're actually finding dinosaur bones. I think that there were a lot of giant creatures around in the far past, that have died, legitimately died out. And obviously, there were certain creatures that were a lot bigger, such as we know that tigers were a lot bigger, for example. We know that elephants were a lot bigger. There were actually giant creatures around that didn't survive for whatever reason. So yeah, I think
giant trees too, right? I mean,
giant trees,
massive trees.
Giant people as well.
Yeah,
there are huge human-like skulls, aren't there, that are found? But of course, they don't get promoted.
Well, in the biblical sense, it's the Nephilim, right? That's right. That's the Bible saying that there was, fallen angels that mated with humans. They created large people, hybrids, I guess. So
because you see very old pictures of these very large skeletons. I'm
Oh
talking
yeah,
about
I've seen them.
12, 15 feet tall, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I believe that it's the same situation with animals. I believe that once upon a time animals were a lot bigger. Certain species of animals were.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah. So yeah, all of a sudden, dinosaur fossils were being found everywhere. You know, these places have been inhabited for many thousands of years and even been explored by geologists and paleontologists prior to that point, but they never found anything. Why had no dinosaur fossils ever been found before the actual idea of dinosaurs was even dreamed up? And as you said, they sell for a heck of a lot of money at auctions, often millions. You know, and an alleged, as I said, an alleged T-Rex bone recently sold for 12 million. It's a very, very profitable business.
Wow.
And, you know, museums are in the business of producing displays that are popular and appealing, and film producers and the media need to produce material to sell to stay in business.
Yeah.
And of course, the mainstream media, our old friend, it loves to hype alleged dinosaur finds to, you know, to propagate the myths. Yeah. So the one thing that about dinosaurs as well that gets me is, have you noticed how, well, certainly when I was a kid, which is, you know, a good while before you guys, but yeah, we knew that dinosaurs had been around, but there was not this proliferation of stuff about dinosaurs such as there is today. I mean, today you get children's toys, books, models, games, computer games, films, movies, TV shows. Everything is just, it's like a ubiquitous theme, isn't it? Dinosaurs. You know, you often see kids walking around carrying little plastic dinosaurs, and I think it's just a case of catch them young. You know, propagandize them while they're still young, so that when they grow up, they've had all this dinosaur propaganda. They can't even begin to consider that they might never have existed. It's just a typical, in my view, Freemasonic plot to make sure that they're ensconced in all this dinosaur nonsense while they're still young and impressionable. Yeah. So yeah, I've got a quote here that I'm going to read out from a paleontologist, and he actually confessed, and he said, "Through mold making and casting, we can totally fabricate limbs, ribs, vertebrae, etc. for the missing pieces of an articulated skeletal mount. Plaster, fiberglass, and epoxies are often commonly used. In reconstruction work on single bones, small to large cracks can be filled in with papier-mâché or plaster mixed with dextrin, which is a starch that imparts an adhesive quality and extra hardness to regular molding plaster. We've also had success using epoxy putties. Large missing fragments can be sculpted directly in place with some of these materials." So in other words, museum personnel, paleontologists that work in these museums consistently and routinely use plaster and other materials to fabricate skeletons or missing bones. You know, as I said, all the huge dinosaur bone displays found in museums across the world are all admitted to be carefully prepared fakes. No independent researcher has ever been granted permission to examine a real dinosaur skull. It's claimed that. Sorry.
So basically what you're saying is that the dinosaur bones that are out there today are no better than the paper mache dinosaur that I made in Mrs. Collins' class in second grade.
Yeah, if you put it like that, absolutely.
All right,
yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
Except yours sucked.
Hey, listen, mine was good, and it looked sort of dinosaur-y. It was good enough.
Yeah. But I mean, how convenient is that? You know, no one, unless you are fully accredited, is allowed to even see them, let alone touch them.
This is a crazy idea, but is it possible that dinosaurs were created to hide these large human bones?
Yeah.
You got to think of some idea. So let's just make giant lizards, you know?
Yeah. I mean, there is actually a company in China, in Sichuan in China, called the Zigong Dino Ocean Art Company, which provides natural history museums worldwide with ultra realistic dinosaur skeletons made from real animal bones. They take real animal bones and they melt it down, they mix them with glue, resin and plaster which is then used as a base material for recasting as dinosaur bones. And they're even given realistic looking fractures and an antiquated kind of fossilized look to achieve the right effect. And here's a quote from their website. Okay, this is, you know, they actually boast this on their website. It says, over 62% of our output goes to American and European markets, which means we understand and are familiar with the intricacies and regulation of exporting to these regions. Since we are a partner of dinosaur museums, all products are made under the guidance of experts of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. We have gained a global sales network reaching the USA, Brazil, France, Poland, Russia, Germany, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, Thailand, Indonesia, Peru, Argentina, Vancouver, Cincinnati, Chicago, and other places. Yeah, so they don't even try to hide it.
They don't even hide it, do they?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, something else as well, you know, real paleontologists, you know, genuine paleontologists reckon that these skeletal reconstructions that you see of T-Rexes with its forward-leaning torso and its huge head, which is far larger and heavier than its counterbalancing tail, these actually, the real paleontologists say that is actually an anatomical impossibility. And even
too top heavy?
Yeah, and even the museum displays of these, you know, can't even stand up under their own weight without support. So it's absolutely impossible that animals of that size and dimensions could exist at all. You know,
John, I'm never going to be able to watch Jurassic Park the same way again.
You mean you have watched Jurassic Park? Yeah. I mean, I must confess I did as well.
Yeah.
A very good film. I mean, a very, you know, the special effects were incredible. But yeah.
Huh.
So yeah, the loads acting on these skeletons are so great that, as I say, real scientists have calculated that the bones of the largest dinosaurs would buckle and crack under their own immense weight. And other zoologists have pointed out that dinosaurs would have to have moved much more slowly than portrayed in movies to prevent sudden shocks to the skeletons. Yeah, so...
So don't worry about getting run down by a T-Rex anytime soon if they somehow miraculously come back.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, when you think of all the dinosaur movies and productions, you know, such as Ice Age and Jurassic Park, and they're all produced by companies like Disney and Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation. Obviously, Rupert Murdoch's 33rd Degree Freemason, 20th Century Fox, a Masonic production company, Universal Studios, I think it was Jurassic Park, wasn't it? And The Land Before Time, and they're owned by Comcast, whose chief shareholders are stockholders of Freemasons, and JP Morgan and the Rothschilds. Discovery Channel regularly features many dinosaur documentaries, is also financially backed by the Rothschilds. I mean, that fact alone speaks volumes to me.
Yeah, sure does.
Yeah. So, and here's an interesting quote as well from actually from a Smithsonian Institute scientist called Dr. Stores Olson. And he said, and I quote, "The idea of feathered dinosaurs and the theropod origin of birds is being actively promulgated by a cadre of zealous scientists acting in concert with certain editors at Nature and National Geographic, who themselves have become outspoken and highly biased proselytizers of the faith. Truth and careful scientific weighing of evidence have been among the first casualties in their program, which is now fast becoming one of the grander scientific hoaxes of our age."
There you have it.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, lots and lots of unanswered questions about evolution and dinosaurs, and you know, I believe that nobody in even partial possession of their full senses should consider the existence of dinosaurs as anything but a convenient evolutionist myth. You know, I think the dinosaur industry should be investigated and questions definitely need to be asked, but of course that will never happen.
Well, the whole theory of evolution, just based on what you've said, it defies common sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I'll talk a little bit now, if I may, about how we're doing for time. Am I okay? Or?
About 15 minutes. We got about 15 minutes.
That's great. That's great. Yeah.
Okay.
I believe that questioning what we're being told is a far better choice than just blindly believing whatever they tell us about dinosaurs and evolution. But one of a really important example which proves that Darwinism is one of the biggest deceptions created by atheistic Freemasonry comes with a resolution that was unanimously carried out in a Freemasonic meeting. Now, the 33rd degree Supreme Council in Paris revealed in its minutes its promotion of evolution as science, which while they actually found the idea themselves hilarious. In other words, they're just laughing at us. They're feeding us all this bull crap and laughing at us, basically. And the minutes from that meeting read as follows, and I quote, "It is with this object in view, the scientific theory of evolution, that we are constantly, by means of our press, arousing a blind confidence in these theories. The intellectuals will puff themselves up with the knowledge and without any logical verification of them, will put into effect all the information available from science, which our agenteurs, specialists have cunningly pieced together for the purpose of educating their minds in the direction we want. Do not suppose for a moment that these statements are empty words. Think carefully of the successors we arranged for Darwinism." Yeah. And
oh my gosh, that's meeting minutes right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Definitely. Yeah. And in its March 1922 edition, the New Age magazine, so that's just over 100 years ago, stated that atheistic Freemasonry will be enhanced by evolution and the development of man himself. So the false scientific image of evolution is a deception set in the 33rd degree atheist Masonic lodges. And Masons openly admit that they will use the scientists and media which are under their control to present this deception as truly scientific, a concept which, as I say, they quite openly find hilarious. These are surreptitious tools for the mind control of the masses, and their main purpose is to cut us off from the roots of the true history of humanity and promote this simplistic, naturalistic, mechanistic view of life as being merely survival of the fittest. And it eliminates spirituality. It removes our spiritual power. We are very powerful spiritual beings, as you know. And what they're trying to do by creating this fake universe through the Big Bang Theory, this fake history of man through the so-called theory of evolution, is to cut us off from our real roots and to turn us into a tiny little speck of random cosmic nothingness. Yeah. And it denies us our true spiritual power because they're scared to death of us, basically, and this is why they do it. So, yeah, I mean, coming to the end of it now, but as I said, I'd like to leave the last word on this topic to
Harvard,
a scientist, a molecular biologist from Harvard, who wished only to be identified as Sam for perhaps obvious reasons when you hear his quote. And here it is, I quote, "To be a molecular biologist requires one to hold on to two contradictory insanities at all times. One, it would be insane to believe in evolution when you can see the truth for yourself. Two, it would be insane to admit you don't believe in evolution. All government work, research grants, papers, big college lectures, everything would stop. I'd be out of a job or relegated to the outer fringes where I couldn't earn a decent living. The work I do in genetic research is honorable, but in the meantime, we have to live with the elephant in the living room. Intelligent design is that elephant in the living room." Excuse me. "It moves around, takes up an enormous amount of space, loudly trumpets, bumps into us, knocks things over, eats a ton of hay, and smells like an elephant. And yet we have to swear it isn't there."
Wow. So that's a molecular biologist from Harvard.
Yeah.
Well, for all those folks out there that say, "Oh, you're just not educated. You didn't go to the schooling. You didn't go to Harvard. You didn't go to Stanford." Well, this guy went somewhere enough to where Harvard hired him to become a molecular biologist and professor at their institution.
Exactly. And this is, there are so many, people say to me, oh, well, if that was true, there'd be whistleblowers by the thousand coming forward and spilling the beans, But I say, well, no, because they don't get a platform. What platform do they have? They couldn't go to the New York Times or the Washington Post and come out with these quotes because they just ignore them.
Yep.
They just bury them. So yeah, whistleblowers do come forward. It's just that they don't have the platform, so it's very difficult to pick up on the information that they provide us with. And of course, it's a very dangerous thing to do. We mustn't lose sight of that fact. If that guy's identity was ever discovered, then he'd be in serious trouble. It may never work again.
Yep, especially in the sciences, because it's become such a religion, to your point, right? It's become
Absolutely.
so corrupted, and if you don't follow the consensus, which is all right, if enough of them believe or are told to believe something, if you go against that, you're just going to be ostracized, and now all that work that you put in is for naught. And a lot of people can't stomach that, John, right?
Exactly.
They don't know what to do. They wouldn't know what to do after that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, sorry, go on, please.
Well, if this is indeed where we're going to wrap up close as to this is what other possibilities exist then besides the theory of evolution in your mind?
Well, yeah, I mean, I often get asked that, and I really don't know. All I can say is that I believe there is intelligent design, as Sam said.
Mm-hmm.
I believe there is intelligent design, but I can't even get my head around what that might consist of. Some people believe in the Christian God, which is fair enough, and I don't personally, but that doesn't mean to say that I have anything against anyone who believes in any God, whether it be Christian, Muslim, whatever, and I can understand where that belief comes from, and I kind of wish in a sense that I did, but something inside me just tells me it just doesn't compute for various reasons. But I mean, that's just my own particular views. But all I can say to that is that I just believe in a creator of some kind, but I don't profess to know who or what it may be. It could be a being. It could be some kind of force. I don't know. And I don't think anyone else really knows either, for sure. I mean, apart from, what your faith tells you, and that's all well and good. So yeah, at least, I mean, I think this is the problem with, or one of the problems with science these days, is that they never admit that they don't know anything. They have to invent stuff to fill gaps. They will never actually come out and say, well, we know we don't know. Oh, they did, occasionally they do. That's probably not absolutely correct, but most of the time they have all these ready-made theories and mathematical equations to fill in the knowledge gaps, and they try and blind us with science because they have to promulgate this agenda of turning us into nothing. Yeah, which they do very successfully.
Well, I find it ironic that they tell us we've been to the moon, we've been to Mars with machines anyway. If they've had different telescopes or satellites and telescopes and whatever go to the far reaches of space in different areas, whatever within our, I guess, solar system, but we've explored only 5% of the ocean. That statistic really boggles my mind here a little bit. Like, you're trying to tell me that we've only explored 5%. That's where it loses me, because there's no way, right, that we've only explored 5% of the ocean, but yet we've figured out how to get to the moon. Don't worry, we got this under control. It's like, well, what about the other 95% of what's here? Especially in the water.
No, that's a very good point. And but don't forget, they don't know how to get back to the moon now. The technology has been lost. They did know how to get there, but somehow the technology has been lost and they can't recreate it.
Why do I sense those buildings are big coming up next time?
Okay.
Well, that would be a fun one to cover. That would be. I've had a problem with the moon landing for a very long time, and I don't, regardless of what people think about that, I mean, there's way too much evidence out there that just makes it nonsense. I mean, complete nonsense in my mind. But there's a lot of people that disagree, and that would be a healthy debate, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
Definitely. Let's do it.
Anything that you want to leave us with this one, man? I appreciate it, by the way. I mean, this has been enlightening. The whole thing with the dinosaurs and everything, I was unaware of a lot of that. So it's very, very interesting to hear all that.
Yeah.
So thanks for that. But is there anything you want to leave us with until we get together next time?
Yeah, not really, other than to say, as always, that there is so much more information about evolution, or the lack of evolution, in my books. You know, I cover it in the falsification of history and the falsification of science. The science one is more up to date. But yeah, we can't possibly do the whole subject, full justice in an hour and a bit. You know, it's a full chapter, thick chapter in my book.
Well, that's a good reason for somebody to buy your book, huh?
Yes, nice little plug there.
His books, like we have done.
Listen, we do have his books, and I haven't read all of them. They're big, you have a lot of information packed in these. So if you're going to get one, expect to read a bit. But the cool thing about your books, John, is that you can skip around to different topics, which I love that. And I actually, I do know somebody who's read your new book, Welcome to the Masquerade, from cover to cover.
Right.
And it may have freaked him out a little bit, but he read it from cover to cover and said it was just absolutely astounding, all the information that was packed in that book. So
that's very kind. Tell him thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So there's that book, John. There's the falsification of science, the falsification of history. Of course, anybody who's listened to some of our previous episodes together, we also had JFK, A Very British Coup, and then also the RMS Olympic, which is the story about the Titanic. And I tell you, we've had this amazing feedback, by the way, on those episodes. So anybody who hasn't listened to those, go check those out, because John goes into some awesome detail about those conspiracies, quote unquote, that we grew up with, right? The Titanic and the JFK, especially. We all grew up with that here in the States and in the world. So can't thank you enough for being on, man. I appreciate it. Mike,
I've enjoyed it immensely, as always, and it's great to talk to you guys. So yeah, roll on the next one.
All right, that sounds good.
Houston, we have a problem.
We do. Yes, we do.
Good title. A very big problem as it goes. Yeah.
Well, thanks everybody for tuning in and listening. As always, we'll be back on here once a month doing the H Files, and this is Mike, John, and I signing off. Have a great evening and stay safe and well.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys.